And now it's time for us to discuss more of these headlines and simple keywords. And Adam joining us via Zoom. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Lena. I think it's been a while since I saw you in headphones. You usually have earphones in, but yeah, you're looking like a radio DJ now.
Thanks, because I don't look the part otherwise.
You usually have those, discreet earphones in usually. So took me by surprise a little bit.
Better for apparently the health of my hearing, but that wasn't the reason
Uh,
why I left my smaller, more
well,
discreet counterpart at home.
maybe maybe I should consider, yeah, switching to some larger sets for the
So we
ears.
can both look like radio
Yeah,
personalities.
yeah, exactly. Like we're on a podcast or something.
All right, for our podcast listeners, you don't have a visual on us, different headsets this morning. All right, let's jump into our first keyword news item of the day. We're going to try to clarify these major headlines, and this is our first pick.
Off to Europe.
So President Yoon's return home from San Francisco will be short-lived as he will be leaving for the UK and France today. Let's talk about what's on the agenda for his European trip. What can we expect?
Yeah, certainly not a schedule that I would like to be on. So he goes to the United States, come back for a few days, if not one or two, and then he's suddenly off to Europe again, crossing the ocean. He'll be in the UK for a 4-day visit. He'll become Britain's first state guest since King Charles III took the throne in May. Yoon's London trip will also mark the first state visit by a Korean leader there in a decade as well. Now, on Tuesday, Yoon and his wife, Kim Gun-hee, will be greeted by Prince William and Princess Catherine of Wales at their hotel. They'll then travel together to the Horse Guards Parade in London for a welcome ceremony. King Charles and Queen Camilla will formally welcome them at the Royal Pavilion on Horse Guards Parade, and an honor guard will give them a royal salute. The king will host them for a private lunch at the palace and later invite Yoon and Kim to view a special exhibition in the picture gallery of items from the royal collection relating to Korea. Now, Yoon and Kim will also take part in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Korean War Memorial to mark the 70th anniversary of the end of the war. They'll also visit Westminster Abbey to lay a wreath at the grave of the unknown warrior. Later, Yoon will visit the Palace of Westminster, where he will deliver an address in the Royal Gallery to members of both houses of British Parliament. In the evening, the presidential couple will also attend a state banquet at the palace's ballroom. On Wednesday, Yoon will attend a UK-Korea business forum with some 200 CEOs and business representatives from both countries to discuss bilateral cooperation. He'll also later hold a bilateral summit with the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Friday. Yoon will visit the Churchill War Rooms, where former Prime Minister Winston Churchill commanded World War II. The King will also bid farewell to the presidential couple at Buckingham Palace, ending the state visit. And of course, it's not the end of that. During this visit, the two sides are also set to adopt a Korea-UK accord meant to detail the future direction of binational cooperation, and of course many other MOUs and business deals and economic deals are expected to be signed as well.
So President Yoon is starting off his European trip in the UK and then headed to France. So what does Yoon have lined up for the country of France?
Yes, that trip will mainly focus on promoting Busan to host the 2030 World Expo. His trip comes about a month, actually, after he visited Paris before as part of his European tour for the Expo bid. Now, during a 3-day stay, Yoon plans to meet with officials from the member states of the BIE, the body in charge of overseeing the World Expo. Yoon plans to directly contact representatives from each country during luncheons, dinners, and receptions. So he'll certainly be busy doing his sales pitch for Busan. Now, the BIE will decide on the host city among Busan, Riyadh, and Rome on November 28th. So we only have 8 days, just over a week left until the vote takes place. And after that, we'll certainly know if all those efforts have been effective. Yoon will also be accompanied by Korea's business tycoons, actually in both Britain and France, for expo-related activities as well. So whether the prowess of the Samsung chief and others will help in Busan's bid to host the expo in 2030. remains to be seen.
Because that's one of the major selling points of Busan as a host city, right? I mean, technologically advanced, well-connected, eco-friendliness. So we'll wait and see this last-ditch effort to host the Busan World Expo. I feel like we've been talking about it for months and months on end.
Yeah, it's only 8 days to go until you get the result on who actually hosts it. But yeah, a lot of efforts have certainly been made.
All right, and on to our second keyword of the day.
System failure restored.
So the government's administered network is back online after a system failure crippled public access to state documents over the weekend, starting on Friday. What's the latest?
Yeah, so it was lucky actually that it happened on a Friday, although it
Sure.
probably would have caused a lot of conveniences because a lot of these, government administrative work is not really done over the weekend, and not a lot of people seek these civil documents over the weekend. But it did cause some disruptions, nonetheless. Now, the outage, sorry, excuse me, forced the government to operate manually while civil services were paused. Yesterday's restoration actually came 2 days after the Seoul Administrative Network and the also widely used online Government 24 portal broke down. This was due to a suspected issue with equipment failure and also a possible error from a recent system upgrade as well. Now, more than 100 government officials and private technicians were sent to the National Information Resources Service in Daejeon, where the network control center is located. IT experts dispatched to the NIRS were trying to determine the exact cause of the system failure. The failure sparked also criticism from the public and the main opposition party, the Democratic Party, calling on President Yoon and his administration to apologize. This is also actually the third time this year that the government's computer network had been paralyzed as well. Now, critics say the fundamental problem has actually not been solved, claiming that the government's response is passive and damage relief measures have not been mentioned. Now, affected citizens do have a way to claim civil damages against the state, but some of them say that proving a causal relationship with the actual economic damage, such as non-issuance of some certificates and documents, actually may be challenging. So that's another area where there could be a lot of public backlash as well. So if there are people that did incur some economic damage or any other inconvenience of that sort, claiming compensation for it might be a tough uphill battle because, trying to prove that their losses were incurred because of this system failure is another legal kind of dispute that could happen as well. But
sometimes we disregard, I think, that time is also money. Trying to prove that would also cost you a lot of time. I'm not quite sure if that's beneficial.
Right, especially as some people who were looking for these documents on a Friday, not really necessarily on a weekend, but on the Friday, might have wanted to prepare some documents to get some stuff done out of the way for today, for Monday, the start of the business day. So, yeah, there could be some, of course, some major and minor disturbances as well. But yeah, there's been a lot of controversy and criticism surrounding these whole, government websites, the whole installation of some programs that you had to install to get these websites running. The previous administration vowed to do away with most of them. Most of them have been done away with, but there are still a few websites where you still have to install these mandatory programs, which is a nuisance for most people. And it does get a bit annoying, but I think it's not isolated to Korea. I think many countries, I know from my experience living in the UK as well, how frustrating these government websites can be and how unintuitive they are. So I think there's still a ways to go, but it's something that can't really be resolved overnight.
We'll leave it there for now so we can take our listeners to our third keyword of the day.
Satellite launch imminent.
So with onlookers suspecting heightened Pyongyang-Moscow military partnership, the question has been, when will the third military spy satellite launch come about? Now, South Korea's defense minister says North Korea may conduct its third attempt to launch that very spy satellite into orbit before the end of the month. I mean, there were some speculations it could happen last week. It didn't. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, so basically the overall consensus is that it could come soon. And the defense minister, Shin Won-sik, was speaking in an interview with KBS. He said South Korea and the United States are monitoring North Korea's movements, and he added that North Korea's preparations are underway for a launch to possibly take place within a week, if not by the end of the month. 30 days is kind of the conservative kind of window that he gave. Now, he noted that it takes approximately a week to move the engine from the test site to Tongchangni, assemble the launch pad and inject the liquid fuel. So that was kind of his basis for the kind of estimated time frame. He said the North is believed to have almost resolved its engine problems with Russian assistance as well. And he noted that a successful satellite launch by the North would indicate significant advances in its rocket technology, which could also be applied to other weapons, including missiles. Of course, that would be in violation of UN Security Council resolutions. So that's where the concerns lie. So basically, the North Koreans are calling it a spy satellite, but in the eyes of South Korea and the Western world, if they put a payload on the tip of it, then it becomes an intercontinental ballistic missile. Now, he also mentioned that the reconnaissance satellite could significantly improve North Korea's surveillance capabilities as well, potentially hindering South Korea's military advantage over the North. And he added that the US is also watching closely. Shin's remarks came a day actually after the North's recently designated Missile Industry Day. That marks the anniversary of its claimed successful launch of the Hwasong 17 ICBM on November 18th last year. The regime has repeatedly said that it will launch another spy satellite into orbit after two failed attempts. In light of those satellites, it was a rare occurrence where the North did admit to its failures. And so that's why it was even more adamant of trying to get one launched and let it be successful. So with that Missile Industry Day happening not so long ago, and all these advancements being made and satellite imagery pointing to a possible other launch as well, we'll have to wait until the next week or two or three to see if one happens.
All right, let's move on to our fourth keyword of the day.
Fighting inflation.
So the government continues to implement measures to tackle inflation, but they seem to be doing little to tame price hikes or shrinkflation. There's also criticism that the government's efforts are too little, too late.
That's right. So as the government accelerates its response to inflation with measures such as item-specific monitoring and also discounts as well on some food items, there are some vegetables and fruits that are showing signs of price stabilization or even a decrease, but that's because the government has particularly been targeting those kind of particular items and issuing some discounts as well. However, the use of tactics like shrinkflation has raised criticism for not being promptly addressed for over a year. Shrinkflation, of course, as a reminder, is where quantity reduces, but prices remain the same or higher. There's also another kind of concern, the so-called skimpflation, where the actual quality of products and services is also lowered, but with the same or higher prices. Now, the government's efforts to control prices have been intensified this month with numerous meetings between economy-related officials, and officials from each ministry have even been visiting production and distribution sites for agricultural, livestock, and fisheries products, as well as industries such as clothing and shoes, to identify factors putting pressure on prices. The government plans to conduct a price survey of major key items and necessities by the end of this month and develop specific measures to enhance consumer rights. Now, some watchers say that signs of huge price increases were actually evident early on, but the government did not address them in a timely manner, despite those warnings, hence why we are seeing kind of huge spikes now. Now, they say the government is putting in measures now as kind of a knee-jerk reaction, and that's why we are seeing kind of the scenario where price hikes are still happening, but the government is kind of quickly and in a rush, basically, to get these prices under control. But once inflation starts kicking off, then it starts kicking off in earnest. And so there's only so much that the government can do as well. Of course, there's a load of external factors beyond the government's control that contribute to inflation as well. It's not just a Korean economic slowdown, but a global one that's happening at the moment. So, and a lot of geopolitical issues are also happening that causes some price hikes. Global oil prices, for example, there's only so much the local government can do here. There's a lot of moving factors and a lot of variables at play here. So, yes, there is some criticism that the government's not doing enough, but then there's others arguing, well, there's not much that the government can really do as well, and the other half. So there's both sides of the argument there.
All right, and for our final keyword of the day on fiscal sustainability, this is our fifth pick.
Pension reform.
So the IMF has urged Korea to drastically reform its national pension system, particularly warning of mass in debt that could double the country's GDP within 50 years.
Yeah, so some ominous words coming out from the IMF, and pension reform is actually one of the pledges that was made by President Yoon, but he was a bit hesitant to act on it because of some political repercussions, of course. But his government is aware that the state retirement fund is expected to run dry by the year 2055. So Yoon is still wanting to reform it. Now, the IMF said in a recent report on Korea that pension reform is needed to safeguard long-term fiscal sustainability and alleviate old age poverty. Now, that could serve as some ammunition in Yoon's argument for a pension system revamp. Now, the IMF pointed to Korea's retirement age of 62, which is below the OECD average of 64, say that will remain below the average even after it is gradually raised to 65 by this year. Now, concerning the country's 9% contribution rates, the IMF compared this with the OECD average of 18%, assessing it as low in international comparisons. Korea's old age dependency ratio, or the number of people aged 65 or over per 100 people of working age, is projected to reach 80 in Korea by 2050. That's the highest in the OECD. There's all these other factors that contribute to Korea's economic figures that warrant this report saying that Korea's national pension needs to be revamped, and including recalibrating the roles of the National Pension Service as well.
Thank you very much, Anna, for today's coverage. We'll see you tomorrow.
You're very welcome. See you tomorrow.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.